the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, hello everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Fact series in which we discuss international political matters every week. This is Foad Mahdavi, and in this episode, I have the honor of being the host of Robert Fantina, an American activist and journalist working for peace and social justice. We are here to discuss the Palestinian issue and the hostility of Zionist regime. Thank you for joining us, Robert, and good to
Thank
be
you. I'm
with
very
you.
happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Let us have your rich words about Israel's human rights violations, ranging from daily abuses to ethnic cleansing to genocidal thinking and actions.
Well,
Go
this is
ahead.
a topic that could take days to discuss. The Zionist regime has been guilty and continues to be guilty of crimes against humanity, war crimes, violation of international law, the blatant and unspeakable violations of the rights of the Palestinian people. It violates international law by moving settlers, over 500,000 now, onto the occupied territories. International law is very clear in saying that an occupying nation cannot move its people onto the occupied territory except for very limited time frames. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that not one settler will ever leave. So this is a violation of international law. Uh, Israel arrests men, women, and children without charge and holds them in Israeli jails without access to family members or attorneys on a regular basis, holds them indefinitely. This is violation of international law. There are countless checkpoints throughout the West Bank that Palestinians must pass through just to get to their own property, just to get to the store. These are arbitrarily manned. They can be the soldiers manning them can choose to open them or close them at will. So students going to school are unable to get there. Farmers wanting to harvest or plant crops are unable to do so in a timely manner. Additionally, raids are held regularly throughout the West Bank in the middle of the night where soldiers break into the homes of Palestinians and arrest any male over the age of 12, take them away. Where they've gone, their family doesn't know. This is all terrorist activity. This is ongoing. Israelis kill Palestinians with complete impunity. Men, women, and children who are shot just going about their business, just going to the store, going to a friend's house, going to school. They are shot in the back, in the head, in just with complete impunity. The Gaza Strip is blockaded by land, sea, and air, again in violation of international law. Such dangerous imports as crayons are not allowed to be brought in. Uh, the whole purpose of this is to demoralize the people and to make them simply surrender to the Zionist goals. Uh, Donald Trump recently, in violation of international law, named Jerusalem the capital of Israel. It is not. It is the capital of Palestine. And this was condemned by the United Nations and by most of the international community. Now, Netanyahu and his co-leader, Benny Gantz, have decided that they're going to annex large parts of the West Bank, again in violation of international law. One country cannot simply annex the property of another. So Israel's ongoing, blatant crimes against the Palestinians are for all the world to see. Also, recently, the 10,000th Palestinian was killed just in the last 20 years. That's 10,000 people in 20 years. This is resulting from periodic bombing of the Gaza Strip, but also the many house raids that I've described previously, and the house raids and the assassinations that occur throughout the West Bank. Israeli settlers can carry whatever weaponry they want. Palestinians are not allowed to carry any weapons at all. The injustice, the fact that Israel has declared itself the nation state of the Jewish people, makes everybody who isn't Jewish a second-class citizen in that country. And certainly the Palestinians and others who are living within uh, the borders of the Zionist regime are treated as subhuman. So this is I could go on, but this is a summary of the many crimes and crimes against humanity, violations of human rights that Israel commits on a daily basis and has been for decades.
Great. Zionism is a system that always has and still does seek the destruction of the Palestinian people, even we see some evil actions against the world community. What are the goals of these measures? Because I've heard that these attacks actually has the bad influence on their actually economic system. How do you analysis these actions?
The Palestinian economy is in complete shambles because of the blockade and because of the occupation. The unemployment is at 50% and higher for younger people. Palestine has one of the most educated populations in the world. Uh, Education is very important to Palestinian people. Many of them are college graduates, but then they have no work because of the occupation and blockade. So this has devastated the economy of Palestine. People are unable to provide for themselves and their families. This is very demoralizing, and this is the goal of Israel: to demoralize the people, to humiliate them, and to simply break them. Now, the world community has a role in this, and the world community can be seen as an accomplice to Israel because there is much that the world community can do to prevent these atrocities, and yet it refuses to do them. The world community can sanction uh, uh, Israel, can prevent trade with Israel. The United States certainly could condition its foreign aid to Israel on Israel's adherence to international law, but it refuses to do so. Now, it hasn't for decades, due mainly to the influence of pro-Israeli lobbies on the U.S. Congress, which is criminal in and of itself. There does appear to be a change in the last few years. Some U.S. members of Congress are speaking out against Israeli atrocities, but it's not enough. The U.S. still gives over $4 billion every year to Israel, despite the fact that there are cities in the U.S. that don't have clean drinking water. Education in the U.S., higher education at the university level is extremely expensive, but yet the U.S. can afford, for some reason, to give money to Israel to aid them in perpetrating the suffering of the Palestinian people. So Israel is entirely responsible for the economic disaster that uh, the Palestinian people suffer from.
And somebody believes that Palestinians must abandon any form of resistance to Israel and appeal to a mythical Israeli central left that is yearning for peace and a two-state solution. They also blames Palestinians for their own persecution
Yeah,
by Israel. I'd like to have your point of
yeah,
view in
blaming
this
the victim
case.
is a typical action that perpetrators will say. Uh, the Palestinians are the victims in this. They are not responsible for their own suffering in any way, shape, or form. A U.S. activist once said that no one has ever, no oppressed people have ever overcome that oppression by appealing to the moral sense of the people who are oppressing them. So the the Israeli government, if it were valid in supporting human rights, would see that the Palestinians only want uh, freedom, self-determination, what everyone else is entitled to. They want to be able to establish their own governments on their own land and to live their lives, go to school, raise families, do all the things that everyone else does. The fact that some people propose a two-state solution with an unarmed Palestine makes absolutely no sense. Right now, the Palestinians in the West Bank are unarmed. All they have are rocks and stones, and Israel has all the weaponry it wants provided by the United States. So when people refer to a war between Israel and Palestine, there's never been a war between the two. It's just been a genocidal uh, action by Israel. The people of Israel, of Palestine, have every right to resist the occupation. It is a guaranteed international right that an occupied people can resist the occupation in any way possible. That means through violent measures, through the boycott, divest, and sanction movement, whatever it is, they are within their rights to resist it. So by resisting the occupation in any way that they can, they're within their rights. They're exercising their basic human rights to self-determination and to achieving their goals as human beings.
Ending such human rights violations must mean ending the Zionist regime and replacing it with guarantees of full, equal civil and political rights for every single Palestinian. How could we reach this
It
point?
could be reached easily if the world community would simply fulfill its responsibility. The world community has a responsibility to everybody to see that human rights are respected around the world. That's what the UN exists for, and all governments proclaim that they support that, but they don't. What needs to happen now is that Israel must be forced by the international community to to move back to its borders, to those that were established before 1967. Now, I could certainly argue that it should revert to the pre-1948 borders, but for the sake of discussion, let's just say pre-1967 borders. And then the anyone living within Israel's borders, the pre-1967 borders, must be accorded equal rights: voting, housing, education, everything else. Right now, for example, in the West Bank, the Israel destroys Palestinian homes to make room to build settlements that only Israelis can live in. This is racist. This first of all, they shouldn't be building the West Bank anyway. But in Israel proper, what we refer to for the sake of this discussion is Israel. Anyone should be able to live anywhere they choose and be able to go to whatever school, marry who they want, and so on. The international community could mandate this by sanctioning Israel. Israel relies on the rest of the country to sell its products, to obtain weaponry, uh, and it wants to be, or it says it wants to be a reasonable and respectable player on the world stage. It is not. The world community could force it to be, though, by making Israel adhere to the same human rights standards that most, but certainly not all, other countries are expected to adhere to. Now, there are violations everywhere, we know that, but the blatant violations that occur uh, at the hands of the Israelis to the Palestinians must end. A two-state solution is viable. Uh, it can be workable if the international community will demand it and will ostracize Israel until Israel adheres to international standards.
And what do you think about the demonstration of International Quds Day?
Demonstration of international.
International Quds Day. Do you know? Do you know about Quds Day demonstration?
I'm not hearing the word. I'm sorry. I,
You haven't heard it?
I
Okay, it doesn't matter. Let's jump to the
Go
relationship.
ahead.
Okay, there is a day. This is the international day, the last Friday of Ramadan month
Yes.
that we are fasting. This is an international day that named
Hmm.
by Imam Khomeini.
Yes.
Uh, and in this single day, the Muslims community
Yes.
demonstrate against the Israeli regimes and
Yes. I was missing the word you had.
pro-Palestine.
Yes. This is a very powerful action. This could be
Okay.
this could be
Mhm.
very significant in Muslims around the world praying and fasting for Palestinian relief from Israeli oppression. I think it's wonderful that this has been called for. I hope that many people, not only Muslims, but others will fast on that day. I plan to fast on that day for that same purpose, and I'm not Muslim, but I think it's something that the world community can join in, showing respect for Islam, showing respect for Palestinians, showing respect for human rights around the world. I think it's a very important move, and I will be continuing to uh, announce it on my social media accounts.
Great. Let's jump to the relationship between America and Zionist regime. The Americans believe that they can carry out any sort of project and conspiracy in the region with the help of Israelis. And actually, the outline of the deal of the century is one of those strategic mistakes. Do you agree?
Yes, the deal of the century is a disaster. It has no uh, there is nothing just about it. It is a crime, and the proposal itself is a crime. It breaks it would break Palestine into very limited areas. There's no country that's constructed like that. It imposes next to impossible conditions on the Palestinians to achieve in 4 or 5 years. It promises uh, economic benefits that are completely unreasonable. Why would someone invest uh, for example, in industry in the Gaza Strip when Israel bombs it periodically? There is nothing just about it. It was orchestrated by Jared Kushner, who is Donald Trump's son-in-law, and one of his closest advisors, who has uh, financial holdings in the illegal settlements. That having those holdings is illegal by U.S. law anyway. This is it is all, it is not the deal of the century. It gives.
Mhm.
I've written about this rather extensively. It gives Israel everything it wants and gives nothing to the Palestinians whatsoever. It leaves Israel in complete control of every aspect of Palestinian life, and we've seen how brutal the Israelis can be. But it isn't just in Palestine that Israel influences the United States. The United States' hostility toward Iran is certainly uh, in affiliation and association with Israel. During uh, the administration of President Barack Obama, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was signed. This, of course, ended sanctions against Iran and was positive for everybody. Uh, Prior to that being signed, Netanyahu spoke to the U.S. Congress and urged them to vote against it, urged them to defeat it because it was not what he wanted. At that time, the Senate was in the control of the Democratic Party, and so that the JCPOA did pass the U.S. Congress. Uh, Trump was in office for about a year when he violated it. The United Nations inspectors were saying that Iran was in complete compliance with this, and Iran continued to comply with it and does to this day because there are mechanisms built into the JCPOA if other countries violate what Iran can do, and Iran is doing those. But the only reason this was violated was because of Israel. The other participants to the JCPOA, their government leaders begged Trump to remain in it. They begged him not to violate it. They said they would continue to support it. And then he threatened to sanction them economically if they did so, at least those that are those European signatories. So they stopped. So they violated it too. This has escalated tensions in the Middle East. It has done nothing to further the cause of peace. It has caused tremendous suffering to the people of Iran who were prior to that benefiting from international trade. When I visited Iran in 2017, I enjoyed my time very much. I was in Tehran, I was in Mashhad, and uh, it was a prosperous and uh, it was a great place to be. Now, because of the United States and due to Israeli influence, the economy is suffering greatly. So Israeli influence on the United States is very powerful, and it is detrimental to the United States. And yet, the U.S. government continues to follow Israel's lead and Israel's demands regarding U.S. actions in the Middle East.
Thank you very much. And for the last question, I would like to know what you think about decline of Zionist
The
regime.
decline of the Zionist regime.
Yeah.
In the last year, a little over a year, uh, the Zionist regime has had to have 3 elections because they could not establish a government. They have now established this this coalition government with Netanyahu and Gantz. They're both avowed Zionists, certainly, but there is obviously disarray within the country, within the government. Now, when Gantz decided to establish this government with Netanyahu, his party basically dissolved because he betrayed them. He had said that the one thing he would never do was work with Benjamin Netanyahu, and that's exactly what he's doing. It's also going to be interesting to see how these two men are able to work together. They don't seem to be the types that are interested in compromise. They're only interested in power. So we're seeing a lot of disarray there now. We're seeing a lot of confusion for the last year during the time when they were unable to establish a new government. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses and what exactly happens, because the strength of the government, that it was a strong government for a long time, but that has certainly splintered in the last year or so. Netanyahu does not have a majority. He was unable to establish a coalition. Gantz was also unable to. They are now supposedly leading the country together, and while their views, they have some shared views, they have some very different views too. Netanyahu's criminal indictment is one of them. Gantz did not want to allow him to continue as the prime minister while he was under indictment. Netanyahu wants to appoint judges who will determine favorably for his case. So there's a lot going on now, and in addition to other problems with racism in the country, which have always been there, but are seem to be boiling up now and becoming worse. So it'll be interesting to see if the government is able to withstand its own internal challenges. I hope it won't be able to withstand them, and that a new and just government will come into play in Israel. That is certainly my hope.
Okay, I hope so. If you want to add something more,
wish
I'm all ears.
everyone Ramadan Mubarak, and just say that
Thank you.
I will continue to fight for justice for the Palestinian people, the Kashmiri people, and the Iranian people, and I do that through writing, and we'll continue to. And I appreciate the time I've had to speak with you today.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate for your noteworthy remarks.
Thank you very much.
And God bless you. Goodbye. Thank you too. Goodbye. Dear audience, it was another talk with Robert Fantina on the Palestinian issue and the hostility of Zionist regime. Thanks for watching, and catch you later.